Well, Laurie, you would you mind telling us a little bit about, yourself, where you teach, kind of students you have, subjects that you cover, that type of thing?
Yes, I teach at Olson Middle School in Bloomington, Minnesota, and it happens to be where I went to junior high myself. And I teach eighth graders. I have three classes of regular eighth grade classes that do geography, and then a gifted class in our district known as Dimensions Academy that also does geography, but on steroids, maybe a little bit. And the kids are really in the gifted program motivated and interested and pretty good problem solvers, pretty techy. So it's fun to use things like ArcGIS with that group.
All right. So, how did you get introduced to ArcGIS online, and then kind of why did you decide to incorporate it into what you do?
I think it all came about in a summer workshop. It would have been 5.5 years ago. I had just had my first baby, and then all of a sudden was back at this workshop and learning all this cool stuff with ArcGIS, but then immediately thinking, this is too much. I don't think I can ever master it, and kind of putting it to the back of my mind. But luckily then, Jim, you kept bringing up this idea of using ArcGIS and kind of wouldn't let it drop enough so that I started to think, yeah, he might be onto something with that. I better listen to this guy. And then just using it a little bit by little bit and gradually gaining some comfort with it. And I'd say I'm still at the some comfort level with it. I'm definitely not an expert in ArcGIS, but I hope that that is encouraging to other teachers, because you don't have to be an expert in it. You just have to be willing to use it, and then the kids will take it and run with it. So, and I feel excited each year to do more and more with it. With the little bit of knowledge I have, the kids can really just go such cool places. And I really feel very supported in learning ArcGIS with people like you or Charlie Fitzpatrick at Esri. I just feel like there's a lot of people kind of behind the scenes ready to jump in and do whatever you need them to do. So it's pretty cool.
Well, what I think the teachers would be interested in finding out about what you're actually doing, you've kind of figured out a way to kind of ease the kids into ArcGIS online. It's not like you take them to the end of the dock and throw them off and see if they can swim. So you've got kind of a series of activities and things that you've developed over the last couple of years, and I think they'd be interested in knowing what those are.
Yeah, I think one of the things to do is to just expose the kids to ArcGIS, because we say those words or Esri and they have no idea what that is. So just showing them, hey, it's this mapping software. Look at these cool maps that you can make with this ArcGIS software. So I go to Maps We Love that Esri puts out, and they just have a wonderful gallery of all of the interesting maps that people are making with ArcGIS from all different industries and walks of life and for all different purposes. And then I just do what I call a starter activity, the bell work for the beginning of class. And I just either show a map and I ask them to think about, why do you think the map maker used those colors? Or I take away the title and the key of the map and ask the kids, what do you think this map might be showing? Just any question to get them engaged and looking at the map. And luckily, again, with ArcGIS, it's just, they're often so visually striking that the kids are willing to just, hey, what is that? What, they're interested in what they're seeing. So that's kind of the first step that I take to expose them to it. And then early in the year, I do like to do an assignment with the kids to get to know them, and I call it the map autobiography. Of course, it's a geography class, so I think I should get to know the kids geographically. I think it's a nice inclusive assignment as well, because kids are coming from all different places, and it's a chance for them to just say, hey, this is me, this is where I'm from, here's where the people in my life are from. And then I do it on paper first, because I think paper maps have their place, and being able to make a map that way is really interesting, and a lot of kids really respond to that. But then it's a very simple map to turn into their very first ArcGIS map, and we just do that by placing what's called map notes on a world map, and we just have a very simple color code. It introduces them to the idea of layers in ArcGIS. And I was able to just make a series of, I think it's 11 videos that are each, between 1 to 3 minutes long, that takes the kids through each step. And by the time they've watched those videos, takes a little less than half an hour. They've made their first map and they feel pretty confident in it. They think it's no big deal, which is exactly what I want. But they get success and they're like, I can do that. What's next? So those are the two very basic intros to ArcGIS that I have been doing for a couple of years now.
So for all the kids, then if I remember correctly, you have them do kind of a little bit higher level activity after that at some point. Is that correct?
Yes. So the other really cool part of ArcGIS is the idea of story maps, using geography to tell the story about whatever topic. And so I like the kids to explore story maps, both by exposing them and showing them some really cool story maps that already exist out there. And then I have them make their first story map um, by mapping out a place, or an IMAX movie called The Greatest Places. It's just a fun geographic movie that gets them thinking about all sorts of different places in the world. But I didn't want them to get too bogged down in the research aspect of making a story map. So I made it just a real simple copy and paste type of activity. So the first step is they plot all the points in the greatest places and make a map. And then from that map, they turn it into a story map. And then I have the script and all the words that need to go on there. And then they can do a little bit of the formatting to just get a very satisfying finished product without getting stuck in the muck and trying to figure out what should I do, and I don't know where to research, I don't want to take notes. It's, again, just that way to get them some success, to get them to buy into using it. And they do, because it's a slick product and it looks neat, and it's easy enough. Again, I have a series of videos that they watch for each step, so they can do it at their own pace, pause, go back to something if they get confused. And voila, about half an hour later, oh, I have a story map, that's pretty cool. And then they're willing to keep going with it, and we kind of raise the stakes in the next assignment.
I think that's great. The idea that there's kind of a scaffolding process going on with starting small and working your way up to something more complicated. One thing we didn't talk about, at any point you kind of use the geo inquiries at all?
Yes, absolutely. As we're, bopping in and out of ArcGIS and using that, we're also using a textbook. Those definitely still have their place, I believe, and learning things like map scale, or the Earth-Sun relationship, and how latitude affects climate. And so I do use, there's a map scale geo inquiry that Esri has put out that's wonderful. It's actually in the upper elementary level, but it works perfectly with my 8th graders, especially at the beginning of the year. It's simple enough that they can do it no problem, and again, feel that success, and exposes them to some of the other tools in ArcGIS, like distance, and just being aware of scale and what that looks like on a paper map versus what it looks like in ArcGIS, and how you can play with that and what you can see at the different levels. So it's totally aligned with a lot of the things we're doing in class. And there's also a running hot and cold, which is all about Earth-Sun relationship, latitude, temperature. And again, it's, the kids aren't creating the map. It's another chance to get them into ArcGIS, to say, okay, here's another map. You just look at it, and then what information can you take away from it? So I just love the many different ways you can use ArcGIS.
And it sounds like those two particular geo inquiries actually fit your curriculum. In other words, something you would have probably been doing anyway, but now you're getting to do it using the geo inquiries in ArcGIS.
Yes, absolutely. And there's many more that would fit too. I mean, we could we could probably do our whole year in geo inquiries. Thanks, Esri.
All right. So the last thing I want to talk about here is the Minnesota on the Map ArcGIS online student competition. You've been doing it with your gifted kids for, I think, 3 years or 4 years coming up. And
Fourth, is that right?
yeah, yeah. And 2 years ago, you had the national competition winner. So if you could just talk a little bit about how you actually do the competition with a class, because it's not like you're just offering it to a few students, you're having a whole entire class work on it, kind of how the process worked, and maybe talk a little bit about the one that was done that was actually a national winner.
Sure. So by the time we get to the spring, the deadline for the competition is usually in May. So we ramp up to the project in about February. And all along in the year, we've been using ArcGIS, so it's not some foreign thing looming out there. It's something that they are comfortable with. And every time we think of something else in class, I ask them to start asking the question, could I make a map of that? How would I do that? What would it look like? I ask them to think about things in their leisure time. Your baseball team, is there something you could do? Could you map out where you hit the ball every time? We just try and think of what zany examples of a map could you make. And sometimes things stick, and sometimes we're like, nah, that wouldn't work. But it's fun to try and get them to think geographically. And so all along the year, we've been doing that so that by February, they're hopefully gravitating towards a topic that they like. We do some brainstorming to think of topics and all sorts of things like that. But once they get a topic, then we have them use their research skills that they gathered when they were in 6th and 7th grade. They did History Day. And those skills are still applicable because part of the Minnesota on the Map competition is a research project. They have to know the information behind what they're mapping to really make a coherent product, a coherent story. What are you telling us? Do you know about what you're telling us? So their research, they have to take notes before they can even start to map or make a story map. And then once they've done their research and thought about kind of what aspect they want to show of their topic, then it's time to start making the map. We try and add on a few more complex skills in ArcGIS, like some of the analysis tools. And then eventually, developing the story map out of that and trying to get to a finished product by end of April about. And then I get to determine the top 5 from my school and send them on and keep our fingers crossed. A couple of years ago, I did have a really wonderful student named Abby, and she was very interested in epidemiology. And I don't know if it would be appropriate to say as luck would have it, no, but we had recently had a Legionnaire's outbreak in one of the Minneapolis suburbs. And they ended up talking about it in her language arts class in a current event situation. I brought it up because I had always thought, that would be like a perfect, project. So she was like, that's it, that's my topic. And so she made really a fairly simple map to show the spread of Legionnaire's disease and how they could have used ArcGIS to determine where the outbreak was from. And she used map notes, again, which is a pretty simple skill in ArcGIS. She used a radius, which is an analysis tool, and just made a really nicely designed, very clear story of Legionnaire's disease in Hopkins, Minnesota, and took her to the state and then the national championship. So it was pretty cool.
And it was pre-COVID, so what was the prize that you got along with Abby?
Man, I owe Abby because we both got to go to San Diego to the Esri user conference, which was amazing. That was an experience. I learned a lot. I saw a lot. It was wonderful. And San Diego, that was beautiful.